the walk gets attention of people, right? And that's the biggest thing. There are a lot of reasons why I chose the walk. Because when you start a campaign, it needs some time. So I bought myself some time. Right now in India, per 1 lakh individual, we have 0.07 psychologists. So we don't have enough psychologists, right? Any parent in India, they've gone through years of conditioning. So you cannot expect that in a one conversation or two conversation, you can break the entire conditioning.
Namaste, everyone, and welcome back to Stories You Should Know. I'm Tarushi, and my guest today is an author. He's a poet, he's a life coach, and he's the person who has taken upon himself to walk 4,000 kilometers across the country to spread the awareness about mental health. Please welcome Ronit. Hi, Ronit, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
How's your journey going?
The journey is being good. I mean, good would be an understatement. It's a lot of things, but it's been very humbling. I'm glad I'm doing this.
You have taken upon yourself a very long walk to cover all across the country from Kanyakumari to Leh, and you started on November 16th. How did you come up with the thought of, okay, let me walk across during the pandemic and meet people from across the city and meet kids and tell them about mental health?
The very basic answer to that is, if I were not walking, would you have taken me this seriously, and would we be doing this podcast right now? Is the question. So, the walk gets attention of people, right? And that's the biggest thing. There are a lot of reasons why I chose the walk. Because when you start a campaign, it needs some time. So I bought myself some time. Second was when we try to create a change in a system, we need to understand how the system works, right? When we talk about mental health, apart from the narrative that's out there in the media and the social media, we need to understand the mindset of people. Why is it that even the fact that now mental health has come into the limelight, still people are not accepting, right? So you need to understand the psyche of people as well. So for that, you need to go there and talk to them, right? It's not something that you can do on an online call or a Zoom call or a phone call for that matter. You have to be physically present there. So that's something I wanted to understand from people's perspective. And we are, fortunately, unfortunately, we are a big country, right? And there are different states. Every state has a different requirement, right? So we have to kind of understand uh, from where do they come from, what kind of a background, conditioning, culture, language for that matter, and then we need to understand how does mental health kind of go into their psyche, and then there are a lot of inputs that they give. So that kind of when we have inputs from all these different states, we can come up with a more holistic approach towards mental health.
Also, we're talking about a subject which people don't usually want to talk about. Like mental health is something which is nowhere close to in our family conversations. We don't talk about it during a family function or sitting over a dinner table or while watching a TV.
Spoken in hushed walls, that it is.
But that's true. And you are going across places towards the rural areas of India where the basic concept of education is also lacking. And then you want to go there and tell people about mental health. How difficult is it?
It is difficult, which is where the kind of crowd that I'm interacting becomes very different. So um, let's say I suppose go to a collector, right? He or she is an IAS officer. Now he's very well read, well informed, and sensitive, which is why he's there. He or she is there, and so when I talk about mental health there, I talk more in terms of development, in terms of education, in terms of building the entire nation. So I will I will bring in the facts like, do you know that a depressed student is 50% more likely to drop out of schools? So while you're making policies to retain students in the school by midday meals and all of that, if you probably appoint a psychologist or a counselor, you can still do the same. So you have to put it in that way. If you're talking to a student, you have to talk about how they are part of this big system wherein the teachers and the parents and the students come, right? So would the students want to convey whatever they want? Would they want to express their emotions? They say yes. Would they want that the teacher understand them or their parents understand them? Yes. So you have to put it in that context. Third would be when you spoke about villagers. So in the rural setup, people don't even know what mental health is, and honestly, they don't need to know, because at the end, it's not about whether someone knows about mental health or not. It's all about the way of life. It's all about the well-being part of it. So let's say I'm talking to a farmer. So I'll start talking about his occupation and how COVID has hit him and how he or she is going through the entire trauma, and do they have a support system in place and all of that. So I just talk to them for half an hour, right? That's when I use my coaching techniques. And at the end of half an hour, they're feeling relieved. Or they're feeling a little less heavy. And then I ask them, did you like this conversation? They say yes. Would you want this conversation to happen on a daily basis? They say yes. Would you want this conversation to happen with your kids when they go to school? They say yes. And then I tell them to see, this is what I'm doing. I propose a curriculum to the education ministry. If that comes into place, your kids will be able to talk about these in schools on a daily basis. And then they get on board. Because for them, it's all about, for them, they look at it in terms of happiness. It's more than happiness and content for them. So you have to put it that way. So the the kind of people you're interacting with, you have to cater it into their language. So that's something, again, the walk comes into picture like that. Because if you just propose mental health, people don't even know what mental health is. And the definition or the idea of mental health is very different for different people. For most of the people in India, mental health is more psychological, like they call it illness.
I mean, it's very difficult for the people to understand the difference between mental health and illness. And everyone over here associates it with the word pagal. If someone says that, I'm depressed or I have anxiety and I want to go and consult a psychologist, it's not considered over here as a good thing to do.
The very fact that they make it a noun, they make an identity. When I say I am depressed, it's not the correct lingo. You go through depression, or you're in the journey of depression, right? Or you're figuring it out. You're like, I'm not depressed. Like that's not a noun. So these are the things which need to be sensitive to the audience, because then when we keep throwing terms like depression, or like like I couldn't eat properly, I'm so depressed, or my life sucks and this and stuff like that, we're normalizing a very wrong thing. So this is where sensitization becomes very important. The kind of interaction we have, because in a crowd of 10 people, if it triggers one person, right? I mean, we are a party to it. So that's something that we also need to be aware of.
So I want to talk about the petition that you started. You want the Ministry of Education to implement mental health as a regular course,
Not a course, a curriculum.
a curriculum for the students from the class of ninth to 12th, right? What all do you propose for the government to add into that curriculum?
Before I go into what I've demanded the curriculum, um, again, there's a lot of misconception in the entire idea of a curriculum. So when I say a curriculum, it does not just mean academia. It does not mean that it's a subject or an all, right? A curriculum means that in an education setup, what are the things you need to do? It can include the subjects and the other extracurricular, co-curricular as well. So when I say we want a curriculum from standard 9 to 12, it has different layers. First is the psychological well-being. That's the first part of mental health or mental well-being. And this is a part which people think that this is the only part, but that's not the only part. The second comes social emotional learning. So first, in the psychological well-being, you talk about mental illness. You talk about the basics of the most common forms of mental illness, and then breaking the stigma, right? Identifying the pattern and sensitizing. That's fun. Second is social emotional learning. We call it SEL training. Like, right? Let's say I'm here right now. So my identity is of an activist. You said I'm a life coach. I'm an author. I'm a son, right? Probably someday I'll be a partner. I'm a citizen of this country. So I'm playing a lot of roles in the society. So to kind of keep a balance between all of these roles, it takes a lot of effort, and sometimes there's a lot of imbalance that happens that messes me up as well. Right. So how to keep that balance, how to respond to things instead of reacting to things. That's called the social well-being. Yeah. Next comes the emotional well-being. You must have heard EQ, right? How to deal with our emotions, how to deal with someone else's emotion, how to accept our emotions, how to express our emotions, stuff like that. That's called SEL learning. Third is life skill training. Basic skills like public speaking, as simple as bargaining in the market. I suck at that. My sister's amazing at that, right? These are the skills that everybody needs to have, right? And then the fourth is a very important point. It's called parent-teacher training. Because while we're trying to sensitize these students in the entire fraternity, it's also important that we sensitize the parents and the teachers. Right. Let's say you were a student and I sensitize. It's okay to talk about your emotions. Go talk to your parents. You go to your parents and they're like, all of this, it's a farce, which a lot of people say, right? Wake up early, or eat green veggies and you'll be fine, right? So that bears no fruition. So it's important that while we sensitize the kids, we also sensitize the parents how to handle with these conversations, and the teachers as well how to handle those kind of conversations, right?
Because we are talking about teachers, and in Indian education system, the one thing that we lack is trained teachers. And I'm telling this for all subjects. Let's take a PE teacher, right? If I'm talking about a physical education instructor in our schools, a lot of time they don't know what physical education actually means. It's not just a parade in the morning, right? There's a lot, and there's a lot to it. And now you're talking about asking the schools to hire counselors, right? And this at right now, this point of time in our country, where teachers are almost losing their jobs and half of them are not trained, how can we expect this kind of thing to happen in school?
You train them. It's as simple as that, right? Um, I'm not asking you to get a counselor because right now, as so right now in India, per 1 lakh individual, we have 0.07 psychologists. So we don't have enough psychologists, right? Second is, so let's say CBSE mandates that every school should have one counselor, but I have visited more than 200 schools and hardly 5% of them actually have that. So it's not about whether you have a counselor or not. You can have one professional who can come train the teachers in that school, right? Now, you don't have to train them, you don't have to make them psychologists, but to deal with, let's say a student comes up with a problem, how to respond, right? As basic as that, how to respond and how to recognize if somebody is not doing well, how to recognize that this is the time that they need professional help so that they can take them forward to a counselor in that city or that block or whatever it is, whoever the next resource person is, right? So this will only happen if they are sensitized. So you train the teachers, and then so because the thing is, let's say if I were a counselor, if I go to your school, right, your kids will not trust me in the first go. They are used to seeing the teachers, they're used to seeing the parent. So we have to use that bridge as well. So we have to train, we have to sensitize that bridge so that they walk through that bridge and come to me, right? So which is where the teacher training becomes very important. We have to play with the trust factor there.
And if I trace back your footsteps from right where you started, and I'm not just talking about this initiative, like in life, when did you realize that okay, mental health is something that you really want to talk about and tell people about it?
So, just like any other Indian, I did not know what mental health was unless life hit me on my face and I discovered um, my journey in mental health. Um, my dream was to get in the army, and I had prepared my entire school life, preparing for NDA. After 12, you have two entries, right? And I got into NDA in 2015, and I was living my dream. I was someone who used to believe in the blueprint of life. When I was in India, I had planned everything. When I'm gonna take my parents on a vacation abroad, when I'm gonna buy my first bike, Royal Enfield. Fauj mein bahut craze hai for Royal Enfield. When I'm gonna start dating someone, when I'm gonna marry my sister off. So everything was planned. Now the thing is, army is a very institutionalized setup. Everything works on merit, right? So you can actually calculate things there. You can see yourself, 3 years, 4 years down the line, this is what you can do.
Right.
So that's how I had calculated my life. And everything was going well until 2017, wherein during training I suffered from a back injury. I have a permanent spine deformity, and I was declared medically unfit to continue. So my career ended in 2017, and the entire world came crashing down because I knew nothing except army. Right, my entire life depended on that. And when something gets snatched away like that, you have no purpose. Your why is lost, and that was a time wherein I contemplated taking away my life. Um, while that entire phase was happening, it was a very ugly phase. When I came back home, um, it was a very unusual feeling. Like I had never felt that way before, and it did not go in a day or two. It did not go even in a month. And that's when I realized that I might need some professional help.
Right.
And then I sought help from a therapist and a counselor. That's when I got to know that I was going through mental health issues, and then that's how I got sensitized towards what mental health is. And initially, when that happened to me, I thought that I was the only one going through this, and life is unfair and all of that. But turns out that every individual is fighting their battles. When I started meeting people, everybody has something or the other going on in their life. They've had some kind of trauma, right? And everybody is in a certain space, is in a certain point in the entire spectrum of mental health. And that's when I realized why does nobody talk about this? Or like why back then I was 19 when that happened, and like in my 19 years of existence, why didn't I know about this? That's when I decided I want to know. So I started working towards mental health to understand how it works, and I started collaborating with this organization. Now I did a lot of courses here and there and as well. Started speaking a lot. That's where poetry and writing and the book and everything came out, because it became a emotional release for me. I started associating art with therapy and all of that. And after a point, I realized that this is something I want to do, because I remember in 2018 when my debut book, The Mighty Mustang, went live, I started receiving a lot of DMs and emails of people all across the country. They started sharing their stories with me. People will tell me that how they were suicidal, or how they would plan to cut themselves or harm themselves, but after getting to know about my story, or after reading my book, they didn't. And I realized that my purpose in life was to stand at the border and protect lives. What I realized was I could still do that
You can do it in other ways also. Yeah.
And that's why I figured out, okay, I'm passionate about this, but then I had to build my tools for it, right? Because passion is not enough. So that's where so Nimhans is one of these big organizations in Bangalore, so I collaborated with them. I did a couple of courses, and in my college they had offered this thing called peer education. So it was basically that we were trained by a set of counselors how to deal with conversations around mental health. And after that, I got my life coaching done and NLP. I'm an NLP practitioner. All of that took time. The entire thing I did in lockdown. And I was doing a lot of individual projects in and around Bangalore. But I realized that India is such a big country, right? That unless you bring like a policy level change in India, it's not gonna.
And also, it's not just about the policy. Even after the implementation of the policy, there are a lot of steps which people don't realize. Like sometimes people fight for policies being implemented, but what after that? How is anyone keeping a check if it's actually happening or not? So there are those things also. And one of the biggest factor in doing something that you are doing is family. The support from the family, and especially when you are in a field of life coaching and helping people out through their life. A lot of families don't understand what kind of a career choice that is, especially and I want to know this especially from you, because you wanted to be in army, and right from that, because of the injury and because of the circumstances, now you're doing something really fruitful, but it's not necessary that everyone understands it. How was it from on your part?
So here's the thing. So by nature, I'm a very protective person. I protect my people, my things, everything around me. I have that tendency, and my parents knew that. That was one of the major reasons why I chose to be in the army, because I wanted to protect my country and protect my. Like I've met three of you right now, right? If you meet me outside, you will see how protective I get in general. So when the injury happened, when I went through mental health issues, obviously it was a surprise and shock and a new thing for my family as well, because again, even our parents, they'd never had mental health education, right? True. So it took time for them to accept it and to acknowledge it as well. But they were on board. And this is something I tell. So I'm from Ranchi and we have our own house there. So it's me, my sister, my dad, and my mom, right? We have our own house. We have 3 meals a day, right? So that way, I will call myself to be very privileged in a setup like India. Out of the 4 people, 2 people have had mental health issues, right? That's 50%. And this is from a relatively privileged family, right? So it took time for my family to accept that. And I was saying that, so 50% from a relatively privileged family suffered from mental health illness, and more than half of India's population does not have a roof over their head, does not have access to 3 meals a day.
For them, mental illness or mental health is not even a topic to talk about. They just want like bread butter.
Not because they don't want to, they just don't have the access to it. I would say they're devoid of it, which is why they don't know. And that's something that needs to be changed. And I wanted to do something about this, and my parents that way have been very supportive. So even when all of this was going on, so when I started, used to share my story, and I have been someone, my friends, and even my family members would come up to me for suggestion, life advices. So my parents that way have been very supportive. When I told them that it was not like a career choice, that okay, I want to do this. Even life coaching, NLP, all of that I discovered because I was having one-on-one conversations, and after one point I realized that the gravity of the situation that people come up to me with is increasing, right? So I need to build my tools. So it's like one step at a time, one certification at a time I started doing, and now I can call myself like an established certified life coach NLP. But that's a long process, right? And my parents have been very supportive that way. My dad especially, he would always keep giving me inputs that, like, oh, this is how you can deal with people. So my dad kind of helps me with the people aspect of things because, again, he's reaching 50. He has seen how people work. So he gives me input on that. My mom gives me more of an emotional support, and like, mera bacha and all of that. My sister's like my sister's more of like my best friend. So she's like my biggest cheerleader, biggest supporter. So whatever I do, she just keeps supporting me. So that really helps. So now it has become like an established life coach, but for me, it's just someone who likes protecting his people. Right. So that's the journey. But yes, it takes time. But even any parent in India, they've gone through years of conditioning. So you cannot expect that in a one conversation or two conversation, you can break the entire conditioning. Right. So this is where persistence becomes a key. When we talk about mental health, we have to be persistent, right? We cannot expect that when we say or we put an argument in front of someone that they'll understand it. If you really want them to understand, first you listen to them. and then respond to them accordingly, and you keep hitting them again and again. That's how they start turning around.
Also, I think because you spoke about the conditioning in our country, it's right. I mean, you cannot change the perception in just like one discussion. It has to start at a very early stage. Like if I have kids and if I started very early with them, the say that it's okay to cry, it's okay to come tell me something, it's okay to go and see a counselor. It has to happen stepwise. And maybe the generation, now the coming generation will understand that much better.
I hope they do.
So coming back to where you are now, tell me how many kilometers have you walked, how many cities you crossed, how many people you met, how many signatures have you attained?
Okay, kilometers is 2,750. How many people I've met? Thousands, I don't know the count. How many schools I've met? I've reached out to around 150-ish. Officials, more than 50. One cabinet minister. And what else did you ask?
How many signatures have you got?
Signatures, online we have 53,000 something right now. Offline we have around 1,500.
And how many you need?
So there's no upper cap to it, as I mean, as much as it takes to get the government's attention. So yeah, there's no number. But yes, I would. I mean, I'm aiming at 1 lakh at least.
So can you just tell us where to sign the petition, where to go online and do this good deed?
Yes. So go to change.org. What you can do is you just type Ronit Ranjan petition. It'll show you the change.org link. Go to the link, read the entire cause and the explanation, and then you have the like signature, online signature option, so you can do that.
And where are you heading next now from Jaipur? Right now, if whoever is listening, you don't know, Ronit is in Jaipur. And we have got a chance to sit with him one on one. And this is not like a Zoom call or anything. I'm very glad and honored to be sitting over here. And
Glad to be here.
where's the next destination?
Next
Where are you going?
destination is Delhi. I'm hitting Gurgaon on 3rd March and hit Delhi on 4th of March.
And you plan to go to Leh.
Yeah. So the entire walk is divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 was from Kanyakumari to Delhi. Because Delhi is where the work is going to happen, because all the ministries and all the heads are there. So what I'm doing is all these states, I told you I'm compiling reports and data, right?
Right.
So when I hit Delhi on 4th, I'll spend some time there, like a week or so, to compile everything and prepare a report. And I'll present it to all the ministries and the officials, and then wait for a response. Meanwhile, I'll plan for my next stretch, because the terrain changes from Delhi to Ladakh, right? So I have to change my gear as well, and then proceed to Leh.
And if you just have to give me like a quick run through of how your day looks when you start walking for another city. Like, how do you exactly manage? Because I know you're on foot.
Yeah.
You're walking.
Yeah.
Like you're literally walking, and this is the generation and the time where people don't like to walk much.
Walking is fun. You should try it.
Like, I'm not talking about myself. I love running, but still I'm asking. Like, how does it look like?
Depends on the state, but on an average, my routine. So I'm on road by 5 a.m. And the average per day is around 55 kilometers per day. Depending on the route, some days it's shorter, 35. Some days it's longer, 67, 70 as well. So the entire stretch is, I'm not going to go into details of this is the pause and this is how I hydrate and all
Right.
of that. But I walk till post, like late afternoon. Sometimes in the evening, the stretches are long. I have my meals. I have all my meetings and emails and calls scheduled. I talk to my family. I strategize for the next day, decide the next destination, and I keep doing that again and again. Unless I hit a city. When I hit a city, I take a few days off. I meet, if I have friends that I meet, or I just put it on my Instagram and I meet people that way, because these stretches through the national highway in the village, it gets very lonely. And I can't be chit-chatting when I'm on road, because
Right.
it's the national highway.
Yeah.
So when I just sit and talk to people when I'm here. I roam around, pamper myself sometimes, and that's how I do it. And so in big cities, I get hold of a lot of these influencers or schools and organizations. So I build a lot of momentum in cities. Then I use this momentum to go to the
ahead,
rural
yeah.
area and then spread that. So when I go to a village, right, they're never accepting of a conversation on mental health. So what happens, like when they see me walking, I'll show them my newspaper article, and they'll be fascinated. Oh, this guy
Right.
is there in newspaper. So why are you doing this? Why are you here? And then I'll tell them about my Fauji story, and they'll be fascinated. And then they'll be like, okay, so why? And then I'll tell Keith, this is what I'm doing. And then they start listening about mental health, and they actually start pitching in. So you have to kind of slide into their DMs, is what you say.
Right.
So you have to slide into their conversation, and that's how it's working. So this is something that I learned as I started walking. All of this was not planned beforehand,
Right.
but I also
Slowly
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
to you
yeah,
how to
exactly.
figure out
Yeah,
things.
yeah. So
This has been a very interesting conversation, Ronit. I am
Likewise.
so glad that I got to meet you and talk to you about this thing, and it
Thanks.
wasn't just like on a phone call or some kind
Yeah.
of a Zoom recording or
Yeah.
something. And I wish you all the very best
Thank you. Thank you.
for your walk till Leh. And whoever is listening to this or whoever is watching this, please connect with Ronit, help him out with his petition, send him all the help that you can. Try to meet him if he's in your city.
Yes.
He's
Give
a
me
fun
food.
person to talk to.
Give me food is all I care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.